the Senate Committee on Rules and Administration to order. It is March 26th, 2026, and it is 9:06 a.m. We have one item on our agenda today, and that is Senator Westlin's Senate File 3833. Senator Westlin, welcome to the committee. Please share with us the provision in your bill that is before the Rules Committee today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members. Thankfully, this is my only trip to Rules this year, but I'm glad to see you. So my understanding about the piece that comes before Rules today is because we are providing for the appointment of legislators to this commission, 6 members from the Senate, and then 6 members from the other body. The Legislative Commission on Legislative Security it provides a unique opportunity to address security issues that are not currently addressed by the Advisory Committee on Capital Area Security. This focuses really on off-campus events and things that happen in legislative districts. So it is a separate commission. It is a truly bipartisan commission that has been fashioned after the Commission on Cybersecurity and also the ACAS Commission as well. So that is my understanding of what brings me here to you today, and I am happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Senator Westlin. Members, do you have questions for Senator Westlin in the proposal before us? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Westlin, you and I serve on a different security committee. It was made up of bipartisan, bicameral commission reviewing the capital security. Why do we need now another organization that focuses on the very same subject?
Senator Westlin.
Madam Chair and Senator Limmer, so the Advisory Committee on Capital Area Security actually covers the entire Capitol complex, including all of the many buildings, and that is the limit of our jurisdiction. As we all know, the events of June 14th occurred off-site. It occurred in district. We are finding more legislators experiencing threats in district, to them in district. This commission specifically deals with legislators versus the entire Capitol complex, and deals specifically with security issues or proposals that may come forward that deal with in district. I will say there have been conversations as this has moved along about could this potentially at some point be a subset of the ACAS Commission. I know that you were the person who provided the bill and created the ACAS Commission, but its jurisdiction is limited. And so I think if we wanted to bring this under ACAS, that would actually require a revision to that enabling statute. So this is different. It's more narrow. Again, it's on specifically legislative security, whereas ACAS is focused more on security on the entire complex.
Madam Chair.
Senator Limmer.
Senator Westlin, I honestly think this is kind of a duplicate of government responsibilities. We try to avoid duplication of government service. Why don't we just take the section of line 2.13 through 2.16, the duties of this one, and add it to the responsibilities of the ACAS organization. Then you don't have all of the bureaucracy that is built into this. Gee, we got 12 members of the legislature now. You're giving them another committee to have closed meetings behind doors. We try to keep that very, very minimal in government. We like to have government. Now, I understand that if it involves the security of individual legislators, certainly that should be confidential. And if it is bordering on a criminal investigation, it would be considered confidential by law enforcement. I'm just thinking this is not necessarily needed.
Madam Chair.
Senator Westlin.
Senator Limmer. I understand your opinion. This is the bill that I'm bringing forward to you today. Before I would chop it up and start adding it to something else, I think I would want to do that a little more thoughtfully to make sure that we are, I don't know if we can just cut this and put it into the ACAS statute. I don't know if that will work as easily as you're suggesting. I'm certainly happy to continue the conversations. I know that in state and local government, one suggestion that was made would be to have a sunset on this, and then at that point have it maybe integrated into ACAS. But I would say again that this is really addressing unique challenges that are not covered under the jurisdiction currently of ACAS. And as we are experiencing more and more threats across partisan lines, and those threats are occurring in district, and again, June 14th was completely off campus, we would never have discussed those issues in ACAS because they don't fall under our authority to do so. So I'm certainly happy to continue discussions, but I guess from my perspective, this is the bill that I have today, and I guess this is the one that I would prefer to move. There is overlap between ACAS and this commission. One member of the Senate and one member of the other body have to be also on ACAS, so there's some overlap there in terms of sharing information.
Madam Chair,
Senator Limmer.
perhaps Senator Westlin can tell me how this is supposed to work. Let's say we had an event that was threatening, such as June 14th. What are these 12 members supposed to do about it?
Madam Chair.
Senator Westlin.
Senator Limmer, sorry. This functions, the idea here is what are preventative things that we should be doing to address, the same as we do with ACAS. When we meet as the Advisory Committee on Capital Area Security, we are discussing recommendations we would like to make to the legislature to improve security. This commission, much like I think probably the way the Data Practices Commission works, if people are considering legislation around security, this would be a place that they could bring it and have a more thorough discussion in this particular commission. So I guess the Advisory Committee on Capital Area Security is not responding to incidents that happen necessarily. They are trying to be proactive in developing security strategies and recommendations that are then given to the legislature and the governor and asking them to implement that. This would function the same way, and this would be targeted and focused on what supports do we need to provide to legislators potentially in district, what are the getting information from experts about these are the types of concerns that are arising. These are things that the legislature may want to consider addressing. So again, I think that this is targeted to a different subset in terms of security issues for legislators.
Madam Chair.
Senator Limmer.
Senator Limmer, yeah. Boy, I have been here too long.
Multiplying.
Talk amongst yourselves.
When I start talking to myself and answering. Yeah, that's right. Senator Westlin, I'm just concerned that we're not staying in our lane as a legislative representative body. If I'm receiving a threat, or if I know of a threat that's happening to me, I'm not going to rely on 12 members of the legislature to protect me. I'm going to contact my local police. I'm going to contact the sergeants here and the security teams that we have here at the Capitol. I think this just isn't going to be anything that's really going to work. And a threat is going to come in. It can come in very immediate, very fast, and a legislative bureaucratic body like this is not necessarily going to protect anyone. And if that's the premise of why we have this, it's really, again, I have to underline, it's a duplicative measure we do talk about threats on the ECAS group. You're a newer member, but previous years we have had discussion about threats to individuals and staff. It was originally made to inform leadership of security threats at the Capitol. At that time, we began to realize that leadership was sometimes unaware of the threats, and we thought that a commission of some sort on a at minimal meeting time per year would be enough. If there was immediate concern, we could call a meeting at any time. We, during the precautions after the death of George Floyd, the Capitol was put with a fence around it. That was a discussion that we had. We had a discussion about some of the security lapses during the reconstruction of the Capitol building and other buildings in the complex. But we have had discussions about individual safety as well. Again, creating another commission, more members on it. I see that it's a 2-year term, so that may mean that we will have a constant rotation of members in it. I just think it's not practical. Plus, we also have the ad hoc security team that leadership created for the Senate members itself, which we also talk about security of staff in this building. Once we start getting our focus away from the working environment here and into individuals' areas of their residence, that's where police should take over. So that's my comments, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Limmer, Senator Westlin, and then we'll turn to Senator Miller.
I'm just going to point you again to lines 2.13 and 2.16, which describes in detail the duties of the commission. The duties of the commission are, at a minimum, to study, research, and analyze issues related to the security needs of state legislators and staff while in district, and review and make recommendations regarding proposed legislation that impacts security for elected officials and staff. Those duties do not squarely fall under ACAS. I will also say that this has been a persistent issue, in particular this year, given the things that have happened. There are a number of proposals out there. I've certainly had proposals and bills. One of them is to direct the post board to develop their own protocols for how they address security issues for members in district. You may recall that on June 14th, there were law enforcement agencies that had no idea where elected officials lived in the areas that they served. I think this is timely. I think it is pertinent. I think individual threats is not what this is talking about. This is talking about the same sorts of things that we do in ACAS, but ACAS covers the security complex. It does not make recommendations for what happens in district.
Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Westlin, what is the status of this bill in the House?
That's a good question.
Okay.
You mean that other body?
The other body.
I can check on that very quickly.
Madam Chair, and you don't need to check now. We can check on that offline. I feel that the intent of this bill is very, very important. Anything we can do to help keep legislators and staff safe, whether it's here at the Capitol complex or back home in our districts. I do really like the idea of trying to combine it with the Advisory Committee on Capital Area Security. It seems like while it's not in the current scope of that committee, it seems like the scope of that committee could be expanded to include this, because it seems like a lot of the discussions would be similar. The goal is to keep legislators and staff and everyone who visits the Capitol safe. and then you just expand that scope to do it back home. So I'm very supportive of what you're trying to do. I think it's very important, but I do like the idea of trying to combine it with an existing committee that has a very similar scope. Simply expanding that, I think, would probably be a better outcome and probably get this done more quickly as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Senator Frantz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Senator Westlin. The spirit of what you're doing here is very, very timely. So I appreciate the effort you're putting in. You know, I'd say, Madam Chair, if we have a question of the security of legislators, recognizing there's a variety of legislators' concerns and probably a variety of legislator risk, frankly, we should be responding to that at the highest level. Whatever the most safety we can provide, that should be the goal of the Senate, the goal of the legislature. To the point of Senator Limmer and Senator Miller, you know, there's a question about the efficient way to do that, and I think you're raising a redundancy question here. And I just would encourage you and Senator Johnson to sort of connect a little bit and say, okay, what do you think of that? How's that work? And I mean that as a compliment to both of you. The two caucuses coming forward and say, this is probably the best way to get this done, will have a little more durability for choices that we make. And I'm with Senator Miller. I'm asking a lot this last couple of weeks, like what's going on in the other body? Can this pass? Do we have stuff? And Senator Westlin, to that point, you know, I think it matters how we move today. You have my support today as a member of the Rules Committee, but just kind of flagging, maybe there's a little more discussion there to have. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Frantz. I believe that this bill has been laid over in state and local government in the House. And I will also, in response to Senator Frantz, and I saw Senator Marty raise up his hand, I think is there acute need for more concerted discussion, whether it is in a group like this or within the legislature itself, about the issue of our security. And there are a number of proposals that are moving or not moving, but are members' efforts, I think, to say, here are things here's what we need, whether it is for the legislature and its own patrol, or an idea like this. There's more talk about guns in the Capitol complex. I mean, it's a wide variety of ideas that members have about the safety and security of elected officials in this body. And there's been a lot of work done outside of the Capitol and inside of the Capitol. I see Secretary Bodden here. He's been front and center in the efforts in the Minnesota Senate, whether it is funding for additional security for people, members in their homes, when we think about the internet and our presence there, and of course, what we've experienced in terms of security in this building and in the Capitol. There has been a really, I think, important effort, and there are still issues when I think about the interaction of social media and its ability to drive people to issue threats toward people. And I don't think a week goes by right now where a member doesn't come to me where they have experienced some sort of threat to their home, their physical nature, their life. So I do think that there is a thing here for us to consider. I know that this bill is going back to state and local government. I don't know if the ACAS advisory group is within the jurisdiction of state and local government, or if that is in the jurisdiction of judiciary and public safety. But I do think that there is some value in thinking about the duality of those two things. And I have been wrestling a lot with how do we make sure we are putting tools in place and rules in place that guide our behavior together to make sure that we're not, by our own actions, creating unsafe situations for members. So I support this as well. It may be that it is a short-term and more acute effort than a long-term effort as it's envisioned right now. But I do think we have work to do to make sure that people who run for office and serve in public office can do so safely to the extent that we can. And then just one last thing, I agree with Senator Limmer that some of that is not our responsibility, but then the responsibility of sworn officers, whether it is our local law enforcement or the state patrol. So I appreciate you bringing the issue forward. It has been front and center for the work that we have been doing, and I have been talking with Senator Johnson about this along the way. Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Westlin. First, thanks to you and for all the work on this, and also the work of the advisory, whatever, on Capitol security. Just two thoughts, not any language or anything else for it, but when you talk about the duties and you cover it a little by saying at a minimum must consider the security needs of legislators and staff. While in a legislative district, I think that we'll take a case of Senator Johnson's probably the first away from the Capitol, and he's in a lot of places that aren't his district and aren't at the Capitol, including elsewhere in St. Paul, elsewhere on the way home, or visiting as he and Senator Murphy and others who are traveling a lot around the state. I think you might want to have it while not just in a legislative district, but while outside of the Capitol complex, because as you said, it's a totally different entity than what's happening here. So that's one thing for you to look at when it goes further. And the other one, and this is perhaps a totally separate subject, but it's related, and I just don't want to drop it, and that is the judicial branch. I think judges are feeling the same kind of threats, same kind of life threats that legislators and other public officials are having. Theirs may be different because they are actually making decisions on an individual's life. They may be more able to know who might be a threat to them and so on. But I think that while we need to do some things to help them, as I think we're planning to do, I think also somebody ought to be looking at that as well. And that's a separate issue than this, but it's related, so I just wanted to flag it. Thank you for the work on this.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Senator Westlin.
And there are a number of provisions dealing with the judiciary because honestly they are often under threat, and we hear that regularly on the news. As this moves, I have always been open to and happy to looking at this is an idea that bubbled up from where we are at today. And as it moves, I'm certainly willing to have additional conversations with anyone, if anyone has specific language to improve this bill. I am always open to any good ideas. Again, this is sort of the bill that I have before you today. I think this is an acute and urgent need, and I hope that we can move this forward and improve it as it moves.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Westlin, for bringing this forward. I just had a couple of concerns that I wanted to voice during this as well, too. First of all, this is another commission that's being set up with 12 members on it. On that, we are a part-time legislature, and as we continue, well, that's the problem. As we continue to grow commissions and task forces and committees and all those things, this becomes more and more a place of full-time employment, even though you have a part-time supposed salary on this one as well too. So I'm concerned that all of a sudden we're going to become a place where we become more full-time, putting a lot of burden on. We just had a debate on the floor yesterday of young parents that were there. This again is going to put another burden on that. If we could keep this within an existing committee or task force or commission, I think that would be, from my perspective, something that would be good, so we're not continuing to grow state government, and the responsibilities that we have would be increasing. The other thing that I'm very concerned about is also the jurisdictional growth. With the ACAS, that is an organization that oversees the Capitol grounds, which is within the purview of the legislature and the executive branch and the judicial branch. That, to me, seems a fit for legislative action. However, we have a commission of 12 people now that proposed that would be having an influence in investigating issues and concerns up in Senate District 1, Senate District 67, and whatnot. And so I worry that could be, for lack of a better word, weaponized, politicized within our districts as well, too. in a way where you have a governing body that would be maybe giving recommendations that politically would be detrimental to us within our own districts, which we would have no control over at that point. To Senator Marty's point as well, too, on subdivision 5's the duties at a minimum within a legislative district or legislative districts. I counted at one point, I think it was 17 legislative districts I drive through to get down here at the state, both Minnesota and North Dakota. So I've got a number of Senate districts I go through to get down here. You know, are we going to be investigating districts across state boundaries and within the state itself just to ensure that one legislator can make their way down here? I just think it's overly expansive. I do agree with Senator Miller and others that we can investigate into these things, but a lot of this is almost reactive to the situations that we have. June 14th, we're doing a lot of studies on what happened back then, but what if we, you know, had an opportunity to do some training, some ability, so members were just aware of what was going on in their district and knew what was happening, a more proactive way of doing things. I'm just uncomfortable with the way that this is shaping up to be right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Westlin.
Madam Chair, and just to reiterate, the purpose of this commission is not to investigate what's happening. This is to be proactive. It is to say, what are other states doing regarding, for instance, security while legislators are away from the Capitol complex, where we have now actually significant security in place that we have not had before. This is literally to try to analyze issues that are bubbling up. What are there trends that we are seeing? And I do think that there is merit in having a group dedicated to that particular challenge, which is different than protecting the entire Capitol complex and all the, I don't know, what, 15 some buildings and all the parking lots. That is a very specific jurisdiction. It is a very specific focus. And the attempt here is to say, we are seeing a substantial increase in threats and credible threats against legislators. Substantial. We just saw threats against Speaker Demuth in her district. We saw threats against Senator Gruenhagen in his district and others. So I think that having a focus on what are the things that we need to do to ensure that people who are holding elected office as legislators are not doing so thinking to themselves, well, I'm going to do this, but there's a chance that I could be harmed. This job shouldn't include risk of death, for example. So I want to be clear, we're not investigating things, but what we are doing is trying to provide information and make recommendations to the legislature, just as ACAS does. This commission was modeled after the Cybersecurity Commission. So there are, I think, leading edge issues that warrant something. Maybe this has a sunset clause in it. Maybe we change the language under the duties just simply to say security needs of state legislators away from the Capitol complex. I mean, there are certainly ways to address that. But I do think that this is, it's an acute issue, but I don't think it's going away. And I think, in fact, we are on a trajectory that the types of threats and things that we're seeing, I don't think are going to get better. That's my cynical view.
Thank you. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Westlin, for all your work on our security. I had a comment. I do agree that we should broaden it to outside the Capitol complex on 214. I think that makes sense. For rural legislators, you stay in my district, many of you, and so I think that is a concern. And then I'm just wondering about the staffing. So we have the Legislative Coordinating Commission providing the staffing for this. Then who staffs the Advisory Committee on Capital Area Security? Is that admin that's staffing that?
Senator Westlin.
Madam Chair and Senator Pappas, that's a good question. I don't believe it's the LCC. I think it may be admin, but I guess I don't know.
Okay. There are people busy looking it up. Are there further questions or comments? Senator Limmer.
Madam Chair, there was discussion of whether or not ACUS could provide these responsibilities. Just a short time ago, ACUS developed their own mission statement. There was no mission statement such as, well, just like this, it doesn't have a mission statement. Does it need one? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if ACUS needed one either, but it changed the complexion of duties on that committee. And it then kind of slowly morphed into a legislative committee where it was considering gun issues, the metal detectors, and other issues, and recommending specific legislation. Quite a bit different than what the original direction of that group was. So in discussing whether or not duties could be transferred from this work to that committee, I would think that history has shown that it can do exactly that if the mission statement that it adopts would do that. Whether if they were in the right authority or not to make their own mission statement, well, there was none that prohibited it, so that's a gray area. But nevertheless, it seems like ACUS does have the ability to expand its mission. Just wanted everyone to know that.
Thank you, Senator Limmer. Ms. Dangle has an answer to the question of Senator Pappas. Ms. Dangle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of pieces of information here. The Lieutenant Governor chairs and her staff, the practical answer is the Lieutenant Governor's chair provides a lot of support staff. The statute requires administrative support to be provided by the Commissioners of Administration and Public Safety and the Sergeant at Arms at the Senate and House of Representatives.
Thank you, Ms. Dangle. Any further remarks from you? We will send this back to state and local government members. That's the path for this, which perhaps gives Senator Westlin time to take under consideration the comments of the committee. Are there any further questions, any comments? Senator Westlin.
Madam Chair, I just want to thank the committee. I appreciate the thoughtful discussion we've had, and many of the comments made are things that we've certainly considered and discussed. I'm pulling up the ACAS statute again, and my goal here is to try to have something that is going to help improve our consideration of ongoing security risks for our legislators when they are away from the Capitol complex.
Thank you, Senator Westlin. Senator Marty, would you like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, move the bill be recommended be re-referred back to state and local.
Senator Marty moves that the bill, Senate File 3833, be recommended to and re-referred back to, recommended to pass and re-referred back to the Committee on State and Local Government. Everybody clear on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed say no.
No.
And the motion is adopted. And with that, our work is done. The committee is adjourned.